Manoj, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. Excited to speak to you and share a little bit about myself, and maybe I'll learn a thing or two from you also.
Yeah, perfect. I think, I was telling you this right before we started recording. We're connected through Danny Leonard, who is on your team and is a co-founder of Ramped, I believe. And we were, previous to that, I was introduced to him through my friend Patrick Kloss at MSV Ventures. And in my conversation with Patrick, I said, what's the most underrated skill out there in Silicon Valley? And he surprisingly said sales. And that's how I got he introduced me to Ramped and all of the things that you guys are doing in terms of really like skill building, skills-based hiring, which is something I feel like is, sorely needed in terms of everyone all figuring out what we want to do. And for my listeners, Manoj and I have conversed a little bit on LinkedIn and other social platforms, and he wrote something that just completely resonated with me about this sort of non-linear career path. And my listeners know that is exactly me. I've been all over the map. So I want to read this LinkedIn post, and I want to start just kind of with your story. So here it is. It says, this was about 2 weeks ago, I think. Here's something I wish I knew before I was in my 30s. Careers don't have to be linear. The same applies to life as well. My journey, immigrant to CPA, to health insurance company, to law school, to investment banking, to fintech startup, to mid-sized company, to founder. All over the map, tons of random roles. I stopped trying to spin a story about how cohesive everything is. It's not. That's the truth. And there's no need to stress out about it. Do what you're good at and what brings you joy. Everything else will fall in place. So I wanted to read that, and I want to start at the beginning. So I want Manoj's story. I want your career story. So start at immigrant for me.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to grow up in two different countries. I spent the first, I'd say the first 18 years of my life, my formative years in India. And even when I was in India, I got to travel a little bit. And then I moved to the US in 2006, where I was a bit of an adult, right? I kind of had an identity, but I still had a lot of learning and growing to do. And, looking back, it gives me interesting perspective, being able to grow up in two wildly different places, try to get accustomed to the way things work, the way people speak, ideas, mindsets. And I think in some ways, it's shaped who I am today. And that's the classic immigrant story, right? And with being an immigrant, there is also a lot of things that are common that you'll see as patterns with a lot of immigrants, right? Folks, especially when they move to the US, they come here seeking access to a better education. They come here seeking access to, upward economic mobility, job opportunities, whatever it is, right? And so with that also comes a ton of stereotypes, which is, it's kind of put your head down, you work, you take whatever job you can find so that you can move up the ladder. All of that is true. And there's a reason why folks are the way they are. But with that also comes a bit of like grit and resilience and a sense of adventure, right? And I don't think a lot of folks immediately ascribe to immigrants the sense of adventure, wanting to test and experiment, because it does take a little bit of that to kind of uproot and put yourself in a completely new country. And so I think that's how I would sum myself up, right? I subscribe to a lot of the standard immigrant stereotypes. To some extent, a bit of them are true, but I also have this natural curiosity and a sense of adventure that's led me through, a whole different types of jobs and career paths.
So what prompted the move from India when you were 18 years old?
My parents were here. My dad had always worked across the world, and they moved here first, and they wanted my sister and I to have access to, again, a better education and good job opportunities. And man, it takes so much courage to move like they did, a lot older in their life, to uproot from friends and family and everything that they were used to, so that they could provide for their kids, right? And I think it's a very noble thing to do. I give them a lot of credit. And so that prompted the move. They moved here first, and they wanted my sister and I to come here and study and get good jobs and build a life for ourselves. And they're here now. They live in Phoenix, Arizona. I spend quite a bit of time with them. I'm actually spending the week with them now. But that was what precipitated the move to the US.
How long were you separated from them? How long were they in the States before you and your sister moved?
Yeah, so my sister moved with them.
Okay.
There was about a year or so where we were briefly separated. I was with my grandparents, having the time of my life. They were not very strict. My grandparents loved me, and I very much enjoyed that. Although I missed my parents, and so there's a year of separation, and then I joined them right after.
Okay, interesting. All right, so you kind of touched on a little bit of the stereotype stuff, and I have a number, not a lot, a number of friends whose parents immigrated or they are first generation. A lot of careers where the path is set, lawyers, doctors, things like that, right? And I think you kind of touched on why that is maybe a little bit already. So you ended up becoming a CPA. How was that decision sort of made as a starting point for your career? Was that, okay, that's a path towards upward mobility, and that was driven maybe by parents or family, or was there other thought process going into your love of numbers?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I love numbers, but not so much. I lasted as a CPA for about 2 years. Here's something that'll set the context, right? The reality is that when you look at, and again, I might be generalizing a little bit, but at least this has been my experience. When folks seek to move to a different country, and when folks seek some type of upward mobility, you have to understand that it comes from a place and an intention of de-risking, right? The idea is
Right.
you want certainty. You want to de-risk as much as possible. And for good reason or for bad, certain career paths or a defined linear structure has a notion of stability with it, has a notion of certainty with it. And that's the reason why you see a lot of folks, especially immigrants, take that path, because the last thing that folks want to do is step into more uncertainty. It's already uncertain enough to move from one country, move to a completely new place. You don't want to add any more uncertainty to it than you are already facing and dealing with. And that's the reason why, at least I've been conditioned growing up to take on a certain type of a career, because you know that, hey, listen, if you're lower middle class, you go to school, you go to grad school, you become an engineer, a lawyer, or a doctor, you work at the same company for 15 to 20 years, you buy a car, you buy an apartment, you have kids, you send them to school, and you die. It's great. It's not a bad life whatsoever. There's some certainty to it. People have done it before. I would call it the median career path, right? And so there's so much conditioning and programming that happens when you're younger, because that's what you hear, that's what you read, that's what you see. And the reason is because folks are, well-intentioned people are trying to avoid exposing you to any more uncertainty than you already are facing. And you'll see folks that don't come from any type of an economic disadvantage or a cultural disadvantage, oftentimes taking on more risks. It's because their lives have not been exposed to as much uncertainty and as much instability, and so they're able to take on those risks in their careers, take on those risks professionally, go pursue something else where there's not as much money, but it maybe fuels their passion. So that's kind of the underlying reason. And so when I graduated, I graduated in 2008, and things were looking shaky already by then. Economy was starting to look a little bit rough. When I went to school, I got a business degree, and it was a small state school, right? 40 miles west of Massachusetts. It was not Harvard. I did really well, graduated pretty much with a perfect GPA, and yet I had some difficulty finding jobs. The only jobs that were available at that point with my degree was I could either become an actuary or become a CPA. Again, de-risk career paths. Folks were hiring. You knew that if you were a CPA, then great, like you could somehow live your life and make ends meet. And I said, screw it, I'll do it. I honestly didn't have much of an interest or a passion for it. I knew that it would lead me to a career path. And so, like most folks that are looking for some structure amid a lot of uncertainty, I said, sign me up.
Yeah, I think it seems like, and I've heard this over and over again, immigrants have a much greater appreciation for the general uncertainty of life, and are realistic about that, which is I think is really interesting. And I think a lot of maybe my contemporaries who have grown up in the United States and maybe are of my similar vintage underestimate the risks that are just baked into life, right? I think you see that like kind of in a lot of stats, like around, let's say, people who make over $100,000 are still living paycheck to paycheck, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's like a really interesting sort of dichotomy. And maybe one of the things that I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you maybe understood at least about the CPA career path was that path may be linear, but those skills are highly transferable. And you can use that skill set in a number of ways, and maybe that's kind of fuel a little bit of your divergent career path.
To some extent, I mean, this is all hindsight, right? One of the
Right.
things that I have learned doing different jobs in different career paths is that I am able to learn how to learn. I think that's the biggest skill that I've learned from doing all of these random jobs and random industries that have nothing to do with each other. It's less about the functional kind of job or role specific skills. It's more about if I'm presented with new material and new information, and I'm asked to do a new thing. When I was younger in my career, I didn't have the confidence or the experience to say, okay, I know how to do it. But having done these different jobs and different roles in different industries, what I now know is, hey, listen, if I can be a CPA and then I can go to law school and then I can go, sell fintech software in an early stage company, they're all completely different things, but at least I have some evidence and some history that I know how to solve a problem. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, at least for me. And that in and of itself is a skill.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like it seems like the people that thrive, and I've had my own startup experiences. I was number 5 at a startup based out of Seattle, especially like in the early stage. So a founder, right? Like you have to wear a lot of different hats. You have to have like a wide sort of range of skills. And so I definitely have seen people who have a divergent path and have mastered a number of different things later in their life. A lot of times they succeed in the startup realm because they're sort of just able to context switch and wear those multiple hats. And I think like at least what I've seen, like hiring in a very early stage, like we're looking for people like that. We were always looking for people that could, you give them a problem and they're going to figure it out. It doesn't mean that they are an expert in that. And then as you get to a later stage, when you have really specific roles, a lot of times you're hiring for more narrow expertise.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to it. The world could use more generalists. I think that there's certainly some value to it. I also wonder how many folks are stuck in careers that they might not necessarily enjoy doing. I wonder if more people believed that they could take on a variety of roles and didn't hold themselves back.
Mhm.
I wonder if they would be better placed and better situated to do things that they'll actually enjoy doing and do a good job at. I personally have friends who, are in their, I'd say, kind of early 30s, mid 30s now. They've done the same job for about 12 years. They feel stuck. They're like, well, where can I go now? I'm mid-career. I don't want to go take an entry-level job. I'm not senior enough. I feel like if I sit here and grind it out for another 8 or 9 years, I'll get that VP level position, whatever that means, and then my life is all set. And I think that there's some loss there with folks not given the opportunity or not believing that they can do other things outside of whatever it is that they've started doing when they were younger.
So what do you think, What do you think maybe some of the keys, and this can just be off the cuff, some of the keys to making that type of change are? Like, I think about this a lot. Actually, my newsletter is called The Break, and it's dedicated to like breaking your concept of work, basically, right? Like breaking out of a rut and uprooting your career to try to do something different. What do you think are some of the keys? Because I'm with you. I think there's a lot of people
Yeah.
in that, and if we can get people to do something different, we can probably unlock a heck of a lot of talent in the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of things. Again, these are things that I wish that I did when I was younger, right? One is just cutting out the noise, right? There's so much noise out there on what you can do and what you cannot do, and how you need to rise up the ranks in any one different career path. As a general rule of thumb, just tuning that noise out gives you a good starting point, right? Because you haven't written yourself out at the very beginning. You want to give yourself a meaningful shot to seeing whether there are other things that you'll enjoy doing. If you subscribe to the noise and you start out by saying, "Oh, that's what I'm hearing, I can't do it," game over, right? And so that's the first thing that I do, is just cut out the noise, challenge the status quo, start from keep an open mind and start there. The second thing is being radically accountable for upskilling. That's a central hypothesis, right? It's because at the end of the day, today with the resources and tools that are out there with digital education, with social media, and how many folks are willing to reach out and talk to you about what they do, let you shadow them at work, there's many different ways where you can be accountable for your own trial run, for your own trial period, right? And so I tell this to folks that are looking to switch careers. They're like, "Well, I was a teacher, I was an educator for 10 years. I want to get into software sales. What do I need to do?" Right? What you shouldn't be doing is applying to jobs randomly and saying, "Hey, I was a teacher. I have some skills. I can do it. I'm a human being. I'm breathing. I have a pulse. Give me a shot." Right? There's other things you could do. You can take a lot of accountability over learning what that job entails, whether it's through online courses, shadowing somebody, spending your weekends learning from an experienced sales rep. There's things that you could do, right, in a very safe space outside of a job setting, and it'll give you a good idea as to whether that's something you'll enjoy doing in a very practical, meaningful way. And so I do think that folks should take a little bit more accountability, especially when you have some time. It would, be beneficial for you, is to learn those sets of skills. And the last thing is also putting yourself out there. I think folks should get more comfortable with promoting themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. And I've seen this happen time and over again, where the most successful people are the ones that are shameless self-promoters. And there's absolutely nothing wrong. Again, today we have the tools and resources to do it. So if you're looking to switch careers, you've A, tuned out the noise, B, you put in the effort to upskill, 3, just do it loudly and do it publicly. So you'll get recognized. You'll be surrounded by like-minded people. And before you know, that'll become your reality. You almost manifest your own reality. One of the best things about building publicly, doing publicly, is that you'll start believing in yourself just by doing it. That's why I write these posts online. That's why I talk about building rap, because how else will it become real for me or for Danny or for Mitch, our co-founders, our team, especially when you're starting from zero? There's definitely some value in doing it publicly because it makes it real. So you do these 3 things, and I wished I did these 3 things when I was younger. I probably would have gotten to where I'd want to get a few years faster, a few years sooner. No regrets, but I do. If I could go back in time, these are the 3 things I'd do.
That's really, really interesting advice. Like, I feel like I am not good at promoting myself. I'm trying to get better. It's something that I am trying to get better at, because I have a podcast, and I have a company, and I've never been the out front person before. I've always been the behind the scenes guy. And so I'm like sort of forced to do that a little bit. And it's interesting, but I think like what you're saying is about talking about it in public is just share your journey. I mean, just like, there's an element of fear of failure. What are people going to think of me when I put this out there about what I'm doing? But like, that's the easiest thing to sort of write about and document, is what you're actually doing. You don't need to make anything up. Just what are you doing? what are the steps? And if you're okay with being kind of raw and a little vulnerable about that, like that's, I think, what you're advocating.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I mean by promoting your journey and building publicly, right? Share with the world, talk about what's working, talk about what is not working. There might be others who are similarly situated who might just need to read that message, who might want to hear about what you're doing, who might find some comfort in what you have to say. And there's a dual benefit. Like I said, it'll become real by talking about it and building it publicly. It goes from it's in my head to I have already made an open and public commitment to the world that this is what I'm doing. This is going to keep me accountable. Folks will, you'll have folks that will support you. I've rarely seen, people criticize what you're doing, and if they do, that's on them. It's never on you. I think the fear of failure is very real. I have it too. Fear of criticism, very real. I have it too. But at the end of the day, more people support, folks that build publicly than not. And if they're not the kind of people that you want to hang out with anyways. And so, and the other thing is, you don't have to be some seasoned executive in order to build something publicly. You could be 20 and out of college, and you have the same right to do it. You have a good set of experience yourself. You're not any less than anybody else. And so don't wait until, you consider yourself accomplished, whatever that even means. Just put yourself out there.
Yeah, it's cool. And then you have like by doing that, you sort of have this, I mean, those are the best moments in life, right? When you're trying to do something new and you overcome it and you do it and you're successful at it. And then you realize from that mountaintop, you realize that all of the trials and tribulations that you went through, that's actually the gold. And by doing it publicly, you sort of have this record of that journey, which is really, really interesting and powerful when you start to talk about like, what do I do? What have I done with my life? Like when you get into your 40s and you have kids and you're like, wow, I'm on the back half of that or whatever. Like you can kind of look back and say, man, I did this, I built it, and here's that public record, which is pretty cool.
I mean, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation if I wasn't sharing publicly about Ramp. And we're still figuring stuff out. We're still early in our journey. There's a lot of things that are going great. And there are days where I wake up and I ask myself, holy crap, what the heck did I get myself into? Right? And that's okay. And that's how you meet interesting folks. And that's how, you learn a thing or two.
I want to get to Ramp, but I want to first, I need to go back to your journey, your career journey for a couple follow-up questions. So, all right. So you were a CPA, you did that for about 2 years. You said you went to a health insurance company, you did law school, you did investment banking, fintech startup. So that's a lot to cover. I don't need to cover all of it. I'm interested in maybe when along that journey, you sort of realized that having this linear path or this cohesive narrative around, when I talk to somebody, how do I piece all this together? And I'm anxious about that. Like, when did you sort of realize that didn't matter in that process, or was there a particular moment or any difficulties around that?
Yeah, I did. It was actually one very particular moment. So I did this thing in investment banking. I worked at these bigger brand companies, and I'd been an advisor, and I've always kind of looked at stuff outside in. And then I decided to join YayPay, very, very small startup. It was 2 co-founders. I joined as the first employee. And when a company is that early, there's only 2 things that you can do to be helpful. You should either build or you should sell. If you're not doing one or the other, you're basically worthless. But what value are you adding that early on in the game? As the company gets larger, there's a lot of specialized functions and all that is great. And so I started selling. I never sold anything formally, right? And I got kicked in the teeth because nobody cared who I was, where I went to school, what my background was, what certifications that I had. Nobody cared, and your customers don't care. I don't even care. They just want you to understand what problems they have, and they want you to guide them through a set of solutions, and they want you to be generally helpful to them. So for the first time in my life, I realized that all of the stuff that I had done doesn't quite matter in the way it presents itself from a linear perspective. It doesn't. Did I pick up a set of skill going to law school? Yes. Did I pick up a set of skills in CPA? Yes. But did it actually matter when it comes to building a business? Does it actually matter when it comes to creating value? It doesn't. And I kind of had a light bulb moment at that point, because I asked myself, could I be doing the same job that I'm doing today without going through all of those years of experience I had, and without going through all of that education that I had? And I came to realize, yeah, I could. I should have taken a slightly different path. Didn't matter, but the reality is I could. And then it made sense to me, in that you don't necessarily have to do A, B, and C in order to get to D. As long as you understand what doing D means, and you're able to, in some setting, get the baseline level of skills that you need to get in order to do D well, and you just simply start doing it, you'll be fine. You don't have to go to school for any particular thing unless you want to be a cardiac surgeon. I do think that there's some skilled trades where it does make sense to have a linear career path. I will also, challenge whether that even applies to a law. I don't think so, but that's a conversation for another day. It's probably a very small set of skills where you need that type of an education or training. But it hit me at that point that I didn't have to do all of these things to work at a startup. I really didn't. My co-founder today, Mitch, did the same job that I was doing, and he had just graduated from college, graduated from UNC, 21, out of college, fresh, never had a full-time job a day in his life. Mitch and I were making dials, doing the same job, and he was actually better at it than I was. And I quickly realized it doesn't matter, and that planted a seed in my mind, because the next thing that I had to do at YayPay was to build a customer success function from scratch. I didn't know anything about customer success. I didn't even know what that meant. And I was responsible for building a function from the ground up, hiring people, figuring stuff out. And again, I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna give this a go. I had to do a bit of fundraising. I gave that a go. The next company that I joined, I had to learn how to scale a direct-to-consumer business, right? I didn't know anything about marketing. I had to learn what SEM was, what SEO was. I didn't know any of that, figure that stuff out. And I think it just kind of built on it. And that's my belief today is careers don't have to be linear. There's different jobs out there. As long as you're, again, willing to upskill, cut the noise, and do it publicly, you have a good shot, just as much as you're the person next to you.
Do you think that works equally well for let's say established corporate jobs? Because I like everything that I'm on board with everything you said, but I think a lot of it, to me at least, a lot of it is a little bit skewed towards like kind of startup entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, create your own type stuff. In that, when I see how corporates hire, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of hurdles and check boxes that you have to check, right? There's a resume, which somebody's going to look at for 7 seconds. And man, if it looks like it's scattered, it's mm-hmm. out, because this guy could be a flake. Or yep. There's a particular path that they have in their head, in their mind. Do you have an MBA? Did you go to business school? Blah, 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 blah. Right? Mm-hmm. That make it difficult, in at least in terms of the established gateways to those positions. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there is some truth to it, not all of it. The job that I got out of law school, that was an investment banking job. I was the only JD. Everybody else that they had hired were MBAs, right? And I still got the job. Is it a little harder? Yes. Is it harder because it's not possible for someone like me to do the job? Or is it harder because an employer has ass backwards hiring practices? I think it's because the employer has ass backwards hiring practices. Now, with that said, you'd have to work a little bit harder to make the case. And you have to get a little bit creative to make the case. And again, the way I approached it was how I would approach any other problem that I had, right? Which is, how do I figure this out? Here's an employer that has a standard hiring practice. They look for someone that has an MBA. Why? The why gave me the answer. They look for someone that has an MBA. It's because the past 7 classes of bankers that they've hired all had MBAs, and they had a history of performance. And so it was a de-risk thing for them. Why would they go out of their way to hire someone from law school? Okay, now I know the why. It's because they don't know whether I can do the job. And they're worried that if they stray from an established practice, it might come bite them in the butt again. So that much I knew for a fact. Then my job was to de-risk both of those risks, was to show them that I could do the job just as much or just as well as an MBA would do, which is why I did a training program. It was an online, Wall Street prep program that taught me fundamentals of financial modeling, so on and so forth. I took a bunch of practice GMAT tests and I sent them my scores and I said, "Hey, listen, here's the standardized test that I know all of your MBAs take. Here's my scores. They're better than all the MBAs that you hire anyways. So take a look at that, right?" And third, I showed them how I understood what the job was, what I was expected to do, right? And so I de-risked it in their minds. Yeah, if I just submitted a resume like every other MBA, absolutely, I agree with you. It would have gone to the dumpster. Can I blame them? Okay, maybe, but not really. That's what they do it because it's work for them, right? And so while I agree with you, and while I do think that it is difficult, I do not think it's impossible, especially if you want to career switch, right? Especially if you're curious about doing something else, you have to put in the work. There's no alternate for that. The same thing happened even at YayPay, because I had to switch. I never worked at a startup. Why would this founder hire me, right? And so I had to show the founder that I understood what product or service that they were selling. I built a deck for him even before I showed up to have a phone conversation with him. So all of this requires extra work. I mean, I know I make it sound easy and I say anything is possible for everyone. Yes. Do you have to do some work to get there? Yes.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, I love it, because I think you've outlined the path to career switch, because it is hard. You're right. It is extra work. Nobody's saying that it isn't, but it's about more relationship building and showing somebody your progress, the line instead of a dot, right? The one meeting is a dot, but when you're showing them the line and trajectory that you're on, you're giving a person multiple touch points, right? Like, "Hi, I'm Mike. Hi, I understand the risk that you think that there is for hiring me. Here's how you get over both of those. I've also learned X, Y, or Z." And it's not just those points, it's the connection, because somebody is seeing and waking up to the fact that, holy crap, like, you are putting in this work. You're doing way more work than anybody that quote unquote fits this job description has done. Because what have they done? They've submitted the resume and a cover letter, and I've randomly picked the top 3 or whatever, so and I think it's your whole point about building online too. That is how relationships get created these days, right? It is about showing up, showing somebody you're continuously learning or figuring something out or going the extra mile. And that's success. It's a different pair. I would say it's the same. Like, even if you're going after I would argue that even if you're going after a job that you are eminently qualified for, you're on your linear career path, right? Still going through all of those steps and articulating that back to somebody and being creative and standing out and being memorable, like, that's the path. And you're right, it is more work, but like, it's the quality over quantity type thing.
Yes, and then you'll figure out whether you actually want the career path or not, right? Because at the end of the day, if you realize you're unwilling to do all of this work, then ask yourself, is this really something I actually want to do? Because if you do, you'll double down. But if you don't, good, you've saved yourself a few years. Go pursue something else that will give you a lot more freedom and a lot more joy. And so, and on your question about these large corporates, I think it's changing. It's going to take some time. And change has to come from both ends, right? You can't blame corporates. The reason why they've resorted to these hiring practices is because of the way candidates and employers find each other, right? Because you post a job online, you're going to get 3, 4, 5,000 applications. There's no way that anyone sitting there can reasonably review all of these applications. Resumes don't tell a great story. And so we just have a flawed system of connection today. And so that's driving some of the hiring practices. it's changing. It's changing slowly, right? One of the things that we're trying to do at Ramped is this notion of candidate career fit without looking at resumes. Like, how do you use skills as the common currency that both job seekers and employers use to exchange value? Because if you change the conversation to skills and not resumes, you'll avoid some of these challenges that the world is facing today.
Yeah, so that's a good transition to Ramped. I think it's skills, but also like, how do you indicate your sort of general passion, excitement, whatever you want to call it, for the topic too, right? And you can do that online. Like, if you're on LinkedIn talking about your particular area of job or expertise or what's going on in it, and you've got 2 years of history of doing that, and all of a sudden a hiring manager looks at your resume, looks at your LinkedIn page, like, that's a win, because 99% of other people are not doing that. So talk to me about what's been going on with Ramped, where you're at, what's the mission that you're on, and let's get into a little bit of like the last, call it 12 months, of what's happening and where you guys are going.
Yeah, listen, the purpose behind Ramped is very simple, right? We want to truly democratize access to jobs, which means that folks should have a meaningful shot at jobs, not a job link that someone hits an apply button and feel like they have a meaningful shot. Because the reality is you don't. Your resume is going to go into a pool with a million other resumes, and you're not going to make progress. And so we asked ourselves, what is the one thing that we know that would give people a meaningful shot at jobs? How can someone get from zero, which is not having a job, to somehow getting a job? Especially, if you don't have, access to a lot of resources, or you're just starting out your career, which is 50, 60 million Americans every year, right? And education is the answer at the end of the day, right? That's the way that you can go from, I don't know whether I have the interest, the ability, the aptitude to do this job, to I know for a fact, because I've learned these job skills, that I have the interest, the ability, and the aptitude to do the job. Forget about my resume for a second. What exactly is my resume going to tell me? If you're an early career professional or career switcher, and who cares? 2-year degree, 4-year degree, some college club here, worked in retail. Yeah, all of that experience is good, but that's what 15,000 other people are saying. And so what we're trying to do is use education as the catalyst that takes people from being unskilled or not quite skilled to being fully skilled, which is Ramped, and then using that to unlock jobs. And that's what we built, Mike. We built a learning and skilling platform where anybody can come in, explore different career paths. If they find something they like, they can go drill down a little bit more. They can use our content, our assessments, our simulations, our psychometrics, no cost to them. All they have to do is spend time. And when they're done with everything, they can then monetize everything that they've learned through full-time and part-time job opportunities at 130 companies that have all partnered with Ramped, because they think of this as a better way of hiring, where they don't have to look at a resume and write people off. Instead, they can focus only on folks that have demonstrated that that's a job that they actually want to do, and they're skilled enough where they can come in and make an impact from day one.
So are there, what types of jobs are you guys focused on? I know early on, at least, it was sales. I don't know if it's exclusively sales. What are the types of jobs you're looking at?
Yeah, so we are focusing today on early career jobs, right? And by early career, I mean not jobs that you have to do when you're 21, but it's the first job in any given career path. So we started with sales. So what's the first job that you do if you want a career in tech sales? You come in and you're a sales development rep or a business development rep, right? And so that's the first career pathway that we built. We've since added 2 more career pathways. We have a career path for financial advisors, and then we also have a career path for folks that want to get into talent acquisition. So those are the 3 paths that we have live today, and every few months we keep adding additional career pathways. And the reason we want to do that is because we want folks to have choice, right? No one is born thinking that they're going to be a talent acquisition professional or a sales professional. And you don't want to start a job, Mike, and suffer through 2 years and then realize that that job is not for you. That's a colossal waste of time, energy, and effort in 2022. What we want to do is give people an online platform where they can come in, explore career paths, and then by actually doing some of what is expected of them in those jobs through our virtual skilling platform, get comfortable with the career path of their choice, and then actually go and find jobs in that career path, and then ignore everything else, right? You realize that talent acquisition is the path for you. Forget about sales jobs. It's okay. You don't have to do that. You don't have to apply to thousands of jobs there. Start there and crush it. And that's the smart, intelligent way to go.
How does the skilling part of it work? Is that you and your team creating the programming? Is that coming from, directly from some of the partner companies? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a combination. And so we have our own knowledge base, right, that applies across a variety of different organizations for each career path. We also give the freedom and flexibility for companies that work with us to supplement it with anything else that they feel is important for their role. And that's how we work. But at the end of the day, what we're not trying to do is become a university, right? That's trying to shove meaningless education down on them. Folks these days, they don't have a long attention span. Like, that's the reality, right? We live in a TikTok, Instagram, and it's not a bad thing. Because when I was in college, I had to sit and suffer through a 2-hour lecture. My attention span is 20, 25 minutes. After that, it's like, in 1 year, out the other. And so one of the things that we're really focused and disciplined on is how do we take functional job specific content and how do we distill it in bite-sized materials and in ways that the generation of today and tomorrow can actually consume and learn, and how do we cut out all of the noise, all of the unnecessary stuff, right? All the rhetoric. We don't need that. That's not why Ramp exists. It exists to teach you exactly what you need to know in the quickest way possible, because that's the right thing to do.
Okay, so focused on the first level job, in these different pathways. So are you getting like a lot of college students actually using the platform while they're in college? Like, I'm really kind of curious as to, like, the overlap that could be happening here.
Yeah, there are a couple of groups of folks that find value in Ramp. So the first group of folks are recent grads and folks that have just graduated from college, or they might be a year out, or be 2 years out. They fall in that bucket. And they find a lot of value in Ramp. The other group of folks are career switchers, right? And these are folks that have done something for 5 or 6 years and have realized that that's not the pathway for them. People that have, worked in retail, or they worked in the gig economy, or they had a job in customer service, they want to make more money. And we have those also as a group of folks that are trying to switch careers. And of course, anytime you switch career, the first job that you get is obviously going to be the first job in any one career path, even though it might mean a lot more money for these folks, right? Because a lot of folks in retail, you make anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 a year max. Whereas if you want to switch to tech sales, you can be making $70,000 year one, right? 90 year two, and 100 year three. There's no path to that in retail. So that's the second category of people. The third and more interesting category of people that gets me a lot more excited these days is we are seeing folks that are close to retirement or retiring, that are upskilling and finding jobs. We ourselves hired a retired public school history teacher that was a learner on the job platform to come sell software at Ramped. And that's a reality that's possible today. It's a group of people, Mike, that have been written off because a lot of employers are ageist, and they want to work. They can work out of the comfort of their homes. COVID in some ways has been a blessing. It's opened up remote work for everybody. And there's a class of folks in the US that if they want to work for 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day, they're willing and able to do it. They're upskilled. Let them do it. Why not? If it gives them meaning, let Ramp be a platform that helps them bridge that gap. Because at the end of the day, how would someone that taught high school history, how would they know what software sales is all about? Why would an employer even look at them? But I know what's going to happen when they apply to a job. They'll look at it and they'll say, well, too senior, too experienced. Things that typically employers will say is, I don't know if they culture fit, or I don't think they have the hustle. It's all bullshit. I mean, Kathleen's crushing it, right? She's probably one of the best sales reps that I've ever worked with. And I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to work with someone like that. I'm even more happy that they found value in Ramp. And so that's the third group of folks. And as we look into the next 5-10 years and we ask ourselves, what's going to happen when entire categories of jobs are going to disappear? I've already started seeing fully autonomous cars pick up people and drop people off. So what's going to happen to every Uber driver and Lyft driver that's out there? I've already seen robots deliver food. When I was walking in LA, so I saw a robot delivering food. What's going to happen to every DoorDash driver that's out there, right? What are these people going to do? We need some platform to quickly reskill them, and then route them to jobs that will be jobs of the future. And I know that a 2 and a 4 year college degree isn't going to do that. And these folks need a paycheck. The last thing they want to do is go to school for 4 years. And so if we are able to be that platform that quickly reskills people and routes them into career paths of the future, that would be a big win for us. So those are the 3 groups of people that find value in that.
I love that story. I think that we're going to hear more part-time retirement, or whatever. Somebody needs to coin a phrase around that, because I think that's the future for sure. I'm 41 right now. I don't feel like I'll ever retire, because I'll always want to be doing something. So I love that story. And I think one other group that you might want to look at is moms coming back into the workforce. Man, I have worked with some amazing moms who are just hyper efficient, looking for part-time work or maybe getting back into full-time, and they're ready to go, and they're really, really good. So that might be another spot for you to look at.
I smile because the other sales hire is a mom who took a 10-year career break, also a learner on Ramp, also a sales hire. So the 2 full-time salespeople that we had, hire 1 and hire 2, are these folks, right? And again, I know the challenges that they'll have trying to get back into a career path, because folks will point their fingers and say, hey, 10-year career break, how do I know you actually interested in tech sales? And tech sales ain't rocket science. That's why you have Ramp. You come in and you learn the set of skills and you find a job.
That's fantastic. I love it. I want to be conscious of your time, but I do have one more question. Actually, 2. One's really quick though. I want to read one more thing that you wrote recently that I loved, which is things that scared me early in my career that don't as much anymore. 1, being wrong. 2, not being liked. And 3, breaking norms and conventions. You got anything else to add there?
No, I mean, listen, I would say just try, fail hard and fail often. I feel like we should celebrate failures as much as we celebrate successes. It should be okay to fail, because that's where a lot of my growth has come from. And we should all be doing a better job at creating a space for folks to fail. And instead of pointing fingers and saying you didn't do a good job, or you're not smart, you're not talented, man, acknowledge the courage it takes to try something new. I mean, anything that's worth the living for today, every innovation that we're all benefiting and enjoying, has come from someone taking a leap of faith and someone failing, right? And so, especially folks that are early in their careers, you could just keep failing. Anytime I get too comfortable, I know that I'm not doing something right. And so my goal is to always have a bit of discomfort, a bit of unease, because that's where most of the growth comes from.
Very good. I think what stands out most to me in light of our conversation today is number 3, breaking norms and conventions. When I think about our conversation around career switching and how to get hired, right? You have to be willing to break some of those norms and conventions. You can't be constrained by the regular resume application process, right? You got to figure out how to be okay breaking that and promoting yourself, right, in that process. So that's what stands out to me. I love it. I hope you keep posting all this stuff, because I'm loving all of it. All right. Well, I really appreciate you being here. My last question is, I've gotten a lot of value out of following you on the internet. I want you to tell people where they can find out more about you and Ramped online.
Yeah, my DMs are always open. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So hit me up. I'm happy to help anyone that's looking to, find a new job. It's something that I'm personally, super invested in, and my inbox is always open. And for those that are interested in Ramp, check out our website, www.rampedcareers.com. We're open for business. And if you're looking for a job, you want a job in sales or recruiting or financial advising, and we'll add more career paths, hit us up. We're here to help.
Excellent. We'll have links to all that in our show notes, and so everybody can find you and hopefully follow you, because again, I've learned a lot, and I hope you just keep building in public. I love it. Manoj, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, we'll talk soon.